Okay, so today we're going to dive into something called slow sex.
Mm.
And it's a philosophy that's outlined in a book by Nicole Daedone.
Okay.
And you can kind of think of it like the slow food movement.
Yeah.
Where it's like really about slowing down and savoring and
Right.
being present and kind of sustainable and all that.
Yeah, and like a deeper engagement with the actual experience
Exactly, yeah.
instead of
yeah.
just kind of going through the motions.
Exactly. Yeah, so we're applying all that, but to intimacy and pleasure.
I like it.
Yeah, and I think this will be really interesting for our listeners because...
No, I think so too, because I mean,
Yeah,
slow sex, like the term itself can conjure up different ideas for people.
yeah.
And maybe some of you have even encountered similar approaches out there or have your own understanding already of
Yeah.
what intimacy means to you.
Right.
But I think what we're going to do here is really get into the specifics of Daedone's philosophy
Yeah.
and the practices that she advocates, because I think there might be some genuinely surprising angles here.
Absolutely, yeah. And our primary source for this exploration is going to be Daedone's book, Slow Sex.
Okay.
And we're going to be extracting like the core principles,
Yeah.
the core tenets of her approach.
Right.
And paying attention to like the central practice, which is orgasmic meditation or OM.
Yes.
And our mission here is really to kind of unpack these ideas in a way that's clear, engaging, and thought-provoking, no matter what your background is with this kind of stuff.
Right, like accessible to anyone who's curious.
Exactly.
Regardless of their experience.
Yeah. So with that in mind, let's just jump right in.
Okay, so I think a really powerful way that Daedone introduces this whole idea
Yeah.
is through a personal story that she calls the tomato moment with her Uncle Bob.
I love this story.
Yeah.
It's such a good story.
It's so evocative.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
she talks about how she had this experience of eating a tomato that her uncle had grown. And it was just like this completely different tomato than any tomato she had ever experienced before.
Right. It wasn't like the watery kind of mealy.
Yes. The standard grocery store tomato.
Yeah, a totally forgettable tomato that we just kind of,
Yes.
use in salads and whatever.
Yeah.
This tomato was something else entirely.
Revelation.
It was described as like rich and earthy and dense, like
Yeah.
it demanded your full attention
Yeah.
with its flavor.
And it was like a sensual experience almost.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting because Daedone uses this really vivid sensory memory
Yeah.
as a metaphor for the potential of slow sex.
Yes.
She's suggesting that just as we kind of get used to maybe those less vibrant mass-produced tomatoes,
Right.
we might also be settling for a limited spectrum of experience
Yeah.
in our own sexuality, unaware of what she calls the heirloom possibilities.
Yes. And I love that analogy because it's like, we're not even aware that there's like a
Right.
better tomato out there. So it's like, how would we even know that there's like this whole other
Right. Are we missing out on something?
level of depth
Yeah.
and sensuality available to us?
And the key takeaway here isn't even just about having a better tomato or a better sexual experience.
Yeah.
It's about the depth of experience that's possible.
Yes.
When we truly slow down and pay attention and savor,
Yes.
it really makes you consider as a listener, like,
Yeah.
is there a whole dimension to intimacy that I haven't even tasted yet?
Yes. Like, what are we missing?
Yeah,
It really makes you think.
totally. And I think Daedone's own path to this philosophy
Yeah.
was sparked by a similar kind of sense of like,
Right.
there's got to be more to this.
Yeah.
The book talks about her personal journey and how, even though she achieved a lot of conventional success in her life,
Right.
she still felt this kind of inner emptiness.
Yes.
And this led her to a really pivotal moment, which was enrolling in a course that was focused specifically on sexuality.
And it's interesting because, when we think about sex ed or,
Right.
learning about sex, it's usually very like mechanical and like,
Exactly. It's like the biology of it.
yeah,
And
mechanics of it.
maybe a little bit about safety and
Right.
STIs and stuff.
Right, exactly.
But not about this deeper level of like
Right.
nourishment and
Like, what is the potential here?
Exactly. And it seems like for her, this course really ignited this intuition
Yeah.
that sex could be a source of profound nourishment.
Yes.
Way beyond just stress relief or
Right.
fleeting pleasure.
Right. It was something much bigger.
It was something
Yeah.
much bigger.
Yeah.
And I think connecting this back to, the listener's experience,
Yeah.
sometimes it's that dissatisfaction with the status quo.
Right.
Even in areas we think we understand,
Yeah.
that can be the catalyst for like
Yes.
exploring truly transformative possibilities.
Yes.
And this intuition that she had that more is possible really forms the bedrock of the slow sex philosophy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's break down these principles because she outlines 3 kind of fundamental pillars
Okay.
of slow sex.
Yeah.
And the first one is stripping down.
Stripping down.
So what does that actually mean in practice?
Okay, so stripping down is essentially about consciously letting go
Okay.
of all the extra stuff that we tend to bring into our sexual encounters.
Interesting.
And this can include a lot of things that have become almost like ingrained expectations.
Okay.
Things like, the necessity of having an orgasm every time,
Okay.
or the reliance on external stimulation like vibrators,
Mm-hmm.
or elaborate fantasies, or even needing to have like a super romantic context
Okay.
to feel like you can have a deep sexual connection.
Right.
So it's about kind of peeling away all of those layers
Interesting.
and seeing what's underneath.
So I'm curious about that because that feels a little counterintuitive,
Yeah.
right? Because we live in a society that's all about like more stimulation.
Right. More is better.
More is better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there a risk that by stripping all that away,
Yeah.
it might initially feel kind of
Yeah.
less exciting?
Yeah, like a little sterile or
Yeah, or just like,
bland.
yeah.
That's a great question. And I think Dayton addresses that potential feeling
Okay.
by using this analogy of when they were redesigning the One Taste Retreat Center,
Okay.
and they didn't just like rearrange the furniture.
Yeah.
They literally took everything out
Raw.
to see what was truly essential.
Okay.
And the result wasn't emptiness.
Yeah.
It was this different kind of spaciousness and light.
Interesting.
So the idea with stripping down in slow sex isn't just about subtraction. It's about what becomes possible
Yes.
when you create that space.
Right? It's like you're making room for
It is
something.
that. You're making room for new sensations,
Yeah.
for a potentially deeper connection
Yeah.
to the present moment.
Yeah.
And that can be really powerful.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so it's about discovering that sometimes less can actually be much, much more.
Okay, I love that. So the second principle is paying attention, which is often referred to as like the art of sensation.
Yes.
And I think this one is really interesting because it kind of speaks to how we are in the world generally.
It really cuts to the core of how we live our lives, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
Dayton points out that, our fast-paced modern lives
Yeah.
don't exactly prioritize noticing,
Right.
listening
Man,
to,
being present.
feeling our physical sensations.
Yeah, we're just in go, go, go.
We're so geared towards
Right.
doing and achieving and
Yeah.
external goals.
Yeah.
And this principle is really, I think it echoes a lot of the core concepts in mindfulness.
Yes.
But Dayton is specifically applying it
Yeah.
to the realm of physical sensation within intimacy.
Yeah. And she uses that exercise
Yes.
with the
Yeah.
flower
Yes, the flower
as an
existence.
example of how our attention just naturally kind of
Totally. It drifts.
drifts. Yeah. And it's so true.
Yeah, and it's only 90 seconds of observation.
Right.
And most people will report their attention waning
Uh-huh.
at some point during those 90 seconds.
Absolutely.
And it's like,
Even when you're trying to focus on it.
yeah, even when you're trying to
Yeah.
pay attention to this one simple thing,
Yeah.
it's
Mind
like
wanders.
her mind wanders.
Yeah.
And I think the crucial takeaway here is this understanding that attention isn't just something you have or don't have. It's
Yeah.
a skill
Yes.
that can be cultivated and strengthened.
Yes.
And Dayton argues that this focused attention is like salt for sex.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, it's like it takes these seemingly ordinary sensations
Right.
and brings them into focus. It reveals these layers of experience
Yeah.
that you might otherwise completely miss.
Yeah.
So it's about being really deliberate about focusing on those physical sensations in your body
Yeah.
and not immediately jumping to categorizing them as like,
Right.
oh, this is a good feeling. This is a bad feeling.
So trying to interpret.
Right. What does this mean?
Yeah. What does this mean?
Yeah.
What does this say about me?
Exactly.
It's just like
Just the sensation.
just the raw sensation.
Yeah.
And I think she illustrates this really well with her own personal anecdote
Yes.
about the knee-biting desire.
It's such a powerful story.
It is, yeah. And it's so relatable in a way because I think we've all had those kinds of experiences where we're told,
Yeah.
like, oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
That's not appropriate or
Yeah.
whatever. And we learn to suppress those sensations.
Right. So it's almost like we're unlearning
Yeah, we're
years of conditioning.
Exactly. We're unlearning all of that conditioning
Yeah.
and re-engaging with our bodies
Yes.
in this really conscious and non-judgmental way.
And that leads us to the third principle, which is asking for what you desire.
Yes.
And I think this one is something that a lot of people struggle with.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's so common to have difficulty articulating what
Yeah.
we truly want,
Especially in intimate settings.
especially in intimate settings.
Yeah.
And Dayton acknowledges that.
Yeah.
She specifically talks about, the common struggle that women in particular often face
Yeah.
in voicing their sexual desires.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there are a lot of factors that contribute to that.
Yeah.
There's the fear of judgment.
Yeah.
There's this feeling of like, oh, I don't want to be too demanding. Or, maybe past negative experiences where they have expressed their desires and it wasn't received well.
Right. Or it wasn't even safe to
Exactly.
express them.
There can be a lot of fear around that. And what's fascinating is how orgasmic meditation directly incorporates asking for what you want as part of the practice.
Interesting.
It creates this structured and safe container for that kind of open communication.
So that brings us to orgasmic meditation.
Yeah.
Or OM.
OM.
Which seems to be like the central practice.
Right. It's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. So can you give us a clear picture of what OM actually looks like?
Sure. So at its core,
Yeah.
OM is described as a simple dyadic meditative practice.
Okay.
And typically it involves one person who's referred to as the stroker,
Okay.
using light touch to stroke the clitoris of another person, the receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And they focus specifically on the upper left quadrant of the clitoris
Okay.
for a continuous duration of 15 minutes.
Okay. And I think it's important to say right here that OM itself is not sex.
Exactly.
Like it's not intended to be intercourse or...
It's not goal-oriented in that way. It's
Okay.
not about achieving orgasm.
Yeah.
It's presented as a focused practice aimed at cultivating very specific skills,
Okay.
like sustained attention to sensation, heightened sensitivity in the body,
Okay.
and clear, direct communication about desire.
Yeah. And these are all skills that can then like enrich your...
Absolutely. They can totally revolutionize.
your actual sexual experience.
Yeah, it's like a training ground
Yeah.
for your nervous system and your communication
Yeah.
and your ability to experience pleasure.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does it actually look like in practice?
Okay, so usually it starts with setting up a comfortable and safe environment,
Okay.
which Dayton calls creating the nest.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the receiver will typically lie down,
Okay.
often with their legs gently open and supported with pillows
Okay.
to make sure they're comfortable and everything's accessible.
Mhm.
And the stroker will sit to the left of the receiver
Okay.
in a position that allows for clear access to the clitoris.
Okay.
And the practice often starts with the stroker just observing
Okay.
and maybe even verbally describing what they see.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then they'll apply a neutral lubricant
Okay.
to their left forefinger.
Okay.
And the stroking begins.
Okay.
And it's really focused on that upper left quadrant of the clitoris. And they maintain a very light pressure
Okay.
for the entire 15 minutes.
And so during that time, are they just like spacing out?
No. It's not about spacing out. It's
Yeah.
really about
Yeah.
bringing your full attention to what's happening.
Okay.
So both partners are encouraged to be present with the sensations
Mm-hmm.
that are arising in the receiver's body
Yeah.
and the energetic connection between them.
Okay, so it's not just a physical thing. It's like an
It's a mind-body.
energetic connection.
Yeah, it's a mind-body energetic experience.
Awesome.
And throughout the 15 minutes, the stroker will periodically ask the receiver yes or no questions
Okay.
just to check in on their experience.
So they're constantly communicating.
Yeah, there's constant communication.
Okay.
And based on the feedback,
Yeah.
the stroker will make tiny adjustments
Okay.
to the pressure or the angle of the stroke.
Got it.
So it's a very interactive back and forth kind of dance.
Yeah, sounds like a dance.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also informed by the stroker's own experience.
Okay.
Like, what are they feeling in their hand?
It's interesting.
What are they noticing about the texture,
Okay.
the temperature, the responsiveness?
Okay, so what happens after the 15 minutes is up?
So at the end of the 15 minutes,
Yeah.
the stroker will gently ground the energy by applying firm palm pressure
Okay.
to the area just for a few moments, and then
Yeah.
they'll take a moment to share what's called a frame,
Okay.
which is basically just each person taking a moment to articulate one particularly vivid or memorable sensation they experienced during the OM.
Interesting.
Yeah, it could be a physical sensation, it could be an emotional sensation,
All right.
it could be an energetic sensation.
Okay.
And it's just a way to kind of like integrate the experience and
Yeah.
share it with each other.
She recommends doing this like regularly.
Yeah, ideally like 3 to 5 times a week.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is, yeah. But the idea is that, the more you practice, the more you cultivate those benefits.
Right.
And it becomes more and more integrated into your life.
Okay, so I'm curious about, like, how she sees orgasm and sexual pleasure through this lens, because it seems like a very different...
It's a very different model. Yeah.
Right.
And she specifically contrasts it with the more traditional view of orgasm.
Okay.
As, that brief, goal-oriented moment of intense release.
Yeah, just like that peak and then it's over.
Exactly. And she points out that model has historically been more aligned with the male experience.
Well, interesting.
And she proposes that OM offers this potential to cultivate what she describes as an intensely pleasurable period of time that emphasizes sustained sensation, connection, and a model of pleasure that actually resonates more deeply with many women's experiences.
Yeah, and I think the analogy she uses of yoga versus aerobics is really helpful here.
Yes, that's a great analogy.
To kind of understand the difference.
Yeah, because, aerobics, much like conventional sex that's focused on reaching a specific endpoint, often has a quantitative goal. Like, I want to burn this many calories, or I want to achieve orgasm.
Right.
Whereas yoga, with its emphasis on breath, present moment awareness, and kind of the unfolding of sensation within each pose, is more about the journey itself. It's about being present with whatever arises. Even if you lose your balance in a pose, that's considered part of the practice. And Daedun positions OM in a similar way as this experiential art form. Where the process itself, including any moments of frustration or unexpected sensations, is integral to the learning and the potential for profound shifts in awareness.
Well, it's not about getting it right.
It's not about getting it right at all.
It's about the
process.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so what are some of the benefits that people might actually experience from this?
So Daedun outlines a pretty wide range of potential benefits. Things like a deeper connection and intimacy with a partner. Improved communication skills. A heightened sense of your own body and its sensations. An increased sexual appetite. And a greater overall capacity for experiencing pleasure.
Wow, so it really touches on like all these different aspects.
Yeah, it's not just about sex. It's about your whole being.
So I'm sure some people listening to this are like, wait a minute. I have so many questions. Like, what about this? What about that? So does the book address those kinds of like common concerns?
Yeah, she actually has a whole section dedicated to that. Addressing common questions and offering troubleshooting advice. So for the receiver, some common concerns might be like experiencing numbness, discomfort, or even like emotional releases. Which can happen when you start to really pay attention to your body. And for the stroker, there can be anxieties about, am I doing this right? What if I hurt my partner? How much lube should I use?
Like all the practical stuff.
All the practical stuff. And she really emphasizes that these are very common experiences. And that the ongoing communication that's inherent in the OM practice is the key to navigating and working through those initial challenges.
Like you're constantly checking in and making adjustments.
It's a collaborative process.
So it sounds like these skills and this awareness that you cultivate aren't just meant to stay within those 15-minute sessions.
Absolutely not.
Like, can you apply this to other forms of sexual expression?
Yeah, Daedun explicitly states that the foundational principles of stripping down those expectations, cultivating that focused attention on sensation, and practicing clear communication about your desires are meant to be integrated into all aspects of intimacy. So including what she calls regular sex. Like intercourse and oral sex.
So it's not about replacing those things.
It's not about replacing. It's about enhancing.
Enhancing, though.
Yeah, it's about bringing that mindful, sensation-oriented approach into every intimate encounter. It's like a whole new way of being.
And towards the end of the book, she introduces this concept of the 4-month orgasm. Which is a pretty evocative.
It's very evocative. And obviously not meant to be taken literally.
No one's having a 4-month orgasm. So what is she talking about there?
So it's a conceptual idea. It's a metaphor for cultivating this sustained state of heightened awareness, sensitivity, and connection to your own desire and pleasure that extends far beyond those isolated moments of climax.
So it's like a state of being almost.
It's a state of being. Yeah. It's like embodying that orgasmic potential in all areas of your life.
Wow.
And she sees OM as like a training ground for developing these habits.
Yeah.
Of receptivity, appreciation, intimate connection.
Yeah.
That can then permeate all facets of your life.
Yeah, so it's really about like a fundamental shift.
Totally.
In how we relate to ourselves and our bodies and our desires.
It's a rewiring of the nervous system.
Yeah.
And the book really concludes by emphasizing the importance of desire itself.
Interesting.
You know, she frames desire not as something to be afraid of.
Right.
Or suppressed or controlled.
Because I think we often think about desire as something that's like chaotic. It needs to be
dangerous.
Dangerous, yeah.
Controlled.
Yeah. And she's saying, no, it's actually like a vital compass.
Okay.
That guides us not only in our sexual lives, but in all aspects of our existence.
Interesting.
And she challenges that common anxiety.
Yeah.
That embracing desire will lead to chaos.
Yeah.
And suggests instead that it's actually this natural intrinsic force.
Okay.
That when honored and understood can lead to a more authentic and deeply fulfilling life.
Yeah, like a natural ecosystem.
Exactly, like the intricate balance that you find in a thriving natural ecosystem.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
In this deep dive into slow sex.
We've gone deep.
Yes, we have.
Hopefully you, the listener, are now thinking about how these concepts resonate with your own experiences and your own perspectives on intimacy and pleasure.
Absolutely. And here's something to kind of think about as you go forward.
Okay.
You know, if that tomato moment suggests that, like, really savoring a single experience can reveal this whole depth that we never even knew existed.
Right.
What might be the equivalent tasting experience in the realm of connection and intimacy?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah. So maybe it's about shifting our focus.
Yeah. Away from achieving a specific outcome.
Right.
And really being present with the sensations.
Yeah, like fully inhabiting the present moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is a really rich starting point.
It is.
For your own reflections and conversation.
Absolutely. And if you're curious to learn more, I highly recommend checking out Dae-Doon's book.
Yes, definitely.
It's a fascinating read.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time.
Happy exploring.
Bye.